Magazines don't look like magazines anymore. Have you noticed that? Print on demand is really a wonderful technology. My whole publishing business relies on it. But it seems like because anybody can publish a book, we don't really have as many professional typesetters going out there, professional designers. And so, literary publications run by volunteers, by people in the community, they don't really go anywhere beyond like the basic 6x9, that's default for most print-on-demand services. 6x9 looks great for trade paperbacks and hardcovers of like 500 to 600 pages, but they look really awkward when you have 100 or less, or 200 or less. Back in the day, we had stuff like this that were sold on newsstands or sent to you in the mail by publishers. These are the two old pulp magazines that I have, and they have inspired me endlessly. I did a video about them a little while ago, talking about handmade zines and kind of harnessing this throwaway power of pulp, like how these things were meant to be disposed of, but now we treasure them. And so when the year started to pass in 25, and I was thinking about how I want the second year of my magazine, the Literary Fantasy Magazine, to be different, I didn't just want to be pigeonholed into decisions I made when I didn't have any experience. I wanted to improve it and build upon it. And so I looked to these magazines. These are mystery magazines, they're not fantasy, but look at that art. You could have fooled me that there's no fantasy in this magazine. I was so inspired with these, and I wanted to do something a little bit different to emulate magazines of old and, make a magazine a magazine. Hi everyone, I'm James, an author, editor, and the owner of The Arcanist, an independent publisher dedicated to sharing excellent fantasy fiction. I want to tell you a story about why this issue of Alfred Hitchcock's magazine from 1987 means so much to me in particular, and how it's influenced my magazine going forward. But before we get into it, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about Old Sorcery by James Callan. This is a book that I edited and published. I know his name is also James. I didn't write this book. I'm just his publisher. But it is on its final days on BackerKit. And if we hit our $5,500 stretch goal, then every backer at every level is getting ebooks of every novel that The Arcanist published thus far, which is 4 books, including Ashen Rider, In a Valley of Shadow, Children Anemia, and Children of Solo, which has appeared on the channel a few times. Every little bit helps. Thank you guys for your support. This has gone beyond my wildest expectations. Around September and October of last year, I found myself in a really difficult financial position, and I had to give away my car. By give away, I mean I gave it back to the lender for a huge loss, but I couldn't pay the payment anymore. So I ended up walking and taking the bus everywhere. And honestly, we are so blessed by modern public transportation, and I was so fortunate that I had a bus line that was just right outside my neighborhood and just went right to the street where I work on. I can't imagine how much more difficult it would have been if I had to take like multiple buses. But my 10-minute commute turned into a 2-hour commute, and I suddenly was exposed to the elements and walking everywhere, and I was doing that until I saved up enough cash to buy another beater. Well, to fill in all that time and to kind of, make myself look forward to the commute instead of dreading it, I started bringing books with me to read on the bus and while I'm waiting at the bus stop. And I had a hard time with that at first because I was bringing big, giant clunkers. Like I remember I had this big 6x9 hardcover of the Elric stories, that new compendium that came out. And it's just a massive book, like that big, because it has like 3 Elric novels in it. And it's heavy. I remember sitting at the bus stop in the rain. There was no cover at the one outside my neighborhood. I'm just like sitting on somebody's lawn being rained on and trying to read this book, and I'm ruining the poor library book because I refuse to not, to be prevented of reading in the rain. And I'm just thinking to myself, once I got on the bus and I'm lugging the thing, holding my coffee and my big heavy backpack with all my work stuff in it, and I'm just thinking, this is not practical. What did people do before, right? Because people use public transportation all the time. I'm very lucky. I haven't had to do that very much. But, if you're in a big city with a subway, or, back in the days of yore when people took steam trains, people had books. It was very common to find books at train stations, at bus stations. You can still find them at airports. But the point was that these books were small and portable and often exciting. It was pulp fiction. That's where a lot of pulp fiction was sold. And I thought to myself, well, I have this. Why don't I just bring this with me? And it worked out perfectly because at the time I was working on a book that is a fantasy mystery. I didn't at the time know anything about the mystery genre. So I just started reading as many mystery short stories and novels as I could. I ended up reading like 10 books on the bus for that study. That was unheard of for me. But this book, even though it was built to be thrown away and it has newsprint paper, it stayed with me. It went in my pockets. It, was with me rain and shine while I'm waiting on the bus stops. And it really meant something to me to have something that just wasn't my phone, that was furthering my mindfulness and my knowledge of something I care about in my pocket, not falling apart. And frankly, I treasure this. I really do. And this one. I haven't read this one yet. I need to. But I treasure these issues, and they were never intended to be treasured. So that's what I carried into the 2026 run of the Literary Fantasy magazine. Our first 2 issues were fine. They had, about 100 to 150 pages each of short fiction and poetry, and they were in that standard 6x9 format. What I didn't like about them was that they just looked like books. They didn't look anything different from an anthology. But a magazine is not a book. It is inherently a different medium. And so I feel like it should look different, it should function different. But there was a few problems with that original format. The first one was that I made a bunch of decisions, before I had ever published any book, and I didn't want to be beholden to decisions I made when I had a lack of experience. I was also thinking like a 6x9 format, while it doesn't even look like a magazine, it's especially not very portable. That's why I love these classic sized sword and sorcery novels, because you can just slip them in your pocket and take them with you. That's really important in this day and age because, authors are not competing with other authors. They're competing with social media. They're competing with Netflix and YouTube. They're competing with the phone, the screen in your pocket. I made a big decision with the Literary Fantasy magazine. First, I decided to go from bi-yearly to quarterly. This has a couple of functions. The first one was workload. My editorial team was scrambling for those first 2 issues. Like, we were just total crunch mode, trying to get all these stories done for a 150-page issue. So I split them into 4 quarterly issues instead of bi-yearly. It's mostly the same amount of content. It actually ended up being a decent amount more in terms of word count, but spread across the year instead of just in 2 pinpoint bottlenecks, right? So we produced our last issue and it went a lot more smoothly. Another function of this is I wanted to make the issues physically smaller, which brings me to the whole point of this video, the thing I just wanted to share with you. This is the Literary Fantasy Magazine Spring 2026. It is the same size as my beloved Alfred Hitchcock's magazine. They fit on the shelf together, they fit in your pocket, and because this isn't 1987 and before, this cover is very durable. And it's a nice gloss finish. It's not going to fade, and these tend to get a little bit scratched up, but they stay in pretty good condition. They're strong, they're flexible. We have nice thick, I think it's 70 GSM paper. And I upgraded the inside interior layout as well. I really wanted this to be a feast for the eyes, not just a feast for your mind. So I spent a lot of time revamping the Literary Fantasy magazine. It fits in your pocket. You can take it with you. It functions exactly like those magazines of old that you'd find at a train station back, 40, 50, 60 years ago. And I love that. It's so novel. It's so fun. I got this proof copy in the mail, and I was just so excited to see it and, see something I made in this form factor. I am in love with it. For the reader, we offer an old school subscription. So this is one of 4, one for every season. You get them mailed to your door, just like the old days. Hey everyone, James from the future here. I kind of wanted to rephrase this point that I had made in the original recording, because what I was trying to say was how the literary fantasy magazine was different. But that's not really accurate. That's not the right word. It's more like what the literary fantasy does right and what readers can look forward to. So a lot of magazines online now are online. They're delivered by Kindle Unlimited, or, they're just digital subscriptions that get posted to a website, or they get turned into an ebook. And then there's also a lot of magazines that kind of, like I said, just function like books. The magazine comes out, it gets posted to Amazon, and you buy it. And there's nothing wrong with this. This is probably a smarter way to do these things nowadays. But I really wanted the literary fantasy magazine to be something that, like the old days, you put in a subscription. I know subscriptions are just terrible now, but magazine subscriptions are almost like of a bygone era where it's a one cost. You're not going to get automatically rolled back in. You buy the year, and then every quarter, every season, magazines show up to your door. That's my vision, and I've priced it in a way to where we can afford the shipping on all of these things. It's tight margins, but I did the math, and where it's at right now, I can realistically, send these things out to people 4 times a year. But you're not just getting magazines mailed to your door. If you're a subscriber to the Literary Fantasy Magazine, you're also getting the ebooks for free. You just get them. I send them to your email. Every time somebody subscribes right now, because I don't have any better solution, I personally email you with all the information and benefits you get. You get access to our online archive. You get all of our ebooks for the Literary Fantasy Magazine. So like if you were to subscribe next year, you're getting this year and 2025 in the ebooks. You pay for the paperbacks, but you're getting all of the digital stuff because it costs us nothing to give that to you. You can also trust that you're getting your reading material from a knowledgeable curator. Everybody on the main staff of the Literary Fantasy Magazine are people that I went to school with. These are people who, spent their own time and money learning how to scrutinize and analyze literature and how to extract the best out of fantasy. College doesn't mean everything. We're also very experienced. We've been doing this since 2024, working very hard on trying to figure out, in the context of The Arcanist, how to find the best fantasy possible that we can, and how to share that with people, how to exemplify the things that we want to see out of the genre. Every single person who's going through submissions is vetted, and we talk to them, we figure out that they know what they're doing, and then it goes through a 3-step process, and we make sure that these are the stories that we want to be sharing with the world, that we think are worth selling to you. As editor-in-chief, I don't read every single submission that comes in, but I do go into the submissions and I act as a reader just the same. And when something does get accepted and passed up the line and it makes it through the managing editor's approval, I read it and I make that final decision. Every single issue that we've put out, I have read at least twice in its entirety. And if I am publishing that, I believe it is something worth your time because I spent my own time on it. Now, telling you this, I'm not trying to imply that other people don't do this. There's a lot of amazing magazines out there where you're going to get the same exact, respect to your time. All I'm trying to say is that the Literary Fantasy Magazine does this in spades. We take it very seriously. We're all well-trained and well-experienced. And I think in a world where anybody can do anything, and that's a great thing, that is why I am where I'm at now, is because anybody can do anything. But there's also a downside to that. If anybody can do anything, then you're going to be seeing a lot of stuff that maybe you don't want to be spending your time on. There's a time and place for everything. And lower quality writing, that maybe isn't ready for publication by traditional standards, there are people who are going to like that anyway. But if you want something that is high quality, high effort in the production side, multiple editorial passes, the writer's best showing of their work in fantasy, well, that is what the Literary Fantasy Magazine is for. We've been extremely fortunate in that so many writers in our first couple of years were basically donating their writing to us. And we don't want to make them do that anymore. Taking writing for free is fine when you're a brand new publication, but now we've been around for a while. We're making some sales. We have a couple of backer kit, a couple crowdfunding campaigns under our belt. So we are moving towards a paid market model. Now, that's not what this video is about, but we want to be able to compensate our writers properly. It's very important for a magazine like us to do that. And that is why we have decided to take the Literary Fantasy Magazine 2026 on to backer kit this summer. I'm going to turn it back to past self, who's going to talk about that some more. So we've decided to take the Literary Fantasy Magazine 2026 and bring it to backer kit so that we can expedite our plans to upgrade compensation for writers. The campaign's not going to be for several months, but you can follow it now, and if you do, you will get the Literary Fantasy Magazine 2025 ebooks for free, and you'll be notified as soon as it launches sometime in the summer. This is probably going to be our biggest one of the year, and it's going to make a lot of decisions for us. I'm extremely nervous about it, but the whole function of this video is just to let you know that this exists, and it's similar to this, and it's cool, and it's fun, and there was so much passion and love put into this. And if you're interested in picking up the Spring 2026 issue, you can do so in the links below. Follow the pre-launch page for TLFM's backer kit, and if you have some time, take a look at Old Sorcery. It's in its final days, and we are really, really close to getting to our $5,500 stretch goal. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me a little bit, and you have a wonderful day.